The UK is the world's third largest market for video and computer games, generating sales of over £1 billion a year. Fuelled by global investment, interactive entertainment is enjoying a worldwide boom. And amid hot debate, computer games are set to enter the classroom. So can teachers turn them into good education, and why should they? Advice comes from those leading the debate worldwide.
First of all, you start with the fact that you don't dismiss games is irrelevant to school. This is a form of cultural activity that is really vitally important to kids, socially and intellectually. And if your first step was to say, get that rubbish out of my classroom, then you've shut down, you've said that what I do in school has no relevance to what you do in the rest of your life, and what you do in the rest of your life has no relevance to what I do in school.
Just as technologies are coming onto the scene that allow for deep learning, conceptual learning, learning how to do and not just talk, we've gone back to a school system that wants you to skill and drill on facts and information out of context. So there's two ships passing each other here, and the schools no longer reflect cutting-edge learning. I offer this as a challenge. Go look at our most recent cutting-edge discoveries about the brain and about how learning works, and ask yourself whether video games reflect those principles of learning or schools do, and you will find out our schools do not. In fact, they readily violate what we know about human learning, and games very often do reflect them.
So is the British education system out of date if it ignores the gaming effect and turns its back on what this powerful technology can offer children?
I like computer games because I think they're fun and they're much better than TV. You can make them do whatever you want. If you've started to get annoyed with James Bond, you can make him jump off a cliff.
I mostly like the two-player games, so I can play him on football and beat him and thing. Yeah.
Well, we like shooting games as well, because they're more fun as well.
I would say it was probably more interesting than TV, because you're interactive. You are in control of what happens. If you watch like some of these shows on TV, they're always the same every week.
If you see what children are doing outside schools, you realise how little we challenge children in schools. If you see what children are doing when they're playing computer games, when they're working together with each other, when they're working on computer games to overcome all sorts of different challenges, managing cities, racing cars, building cars, working with each other to develop new careers and identities, if you think about The Sims or something. When you look at all of that sort of thing, you realise how few challenges we actually really do give children in schools and how little agency we give them, how little control over their own opportunities, potential and learning.
For supporters of the gaming culture in schools like Kerry Facer, computer games are seen as having the potential to revolutionise the way children learn, as well as giving them the skills to operate in the modern working world. Here in Bristol, that approach is being tested by the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts at the Nesta Future Lab, where research into virtual learning gets put into practice. So is technology the answer to providing an effective education system for the 21st century?
I don't think the technology is actually the key issue in terms of whether schools are out of date or not. The technology is part of it, but it's actually a much bigger set of questions around how we view children. And that's where we are out of date in our education system, because we tend to see children as kind of incomplete beings, children that we need to, they're not finished yet, and we need to let them do something real in about 10 years' time once they've grown up enough. And that's the real way in which our education system is out of date. It's in its views of children.
FutureLab is creating radically different learning environments that challenge children just as games can do. One project currently being tested in 2 schools is Racing Academy. It attempts to motivate children's learning around science and engineering.
The Racing Academy game is a racing game based on real physics, in which success depends on users' ability to change the underlying car setup in order to beat their opponent. To do that, you have to understand the underlying engineering principles that are affecting your race performance.
In this prototype of Racing Academy, what the students are doing is two things. Firstly, using the most advanced physics engine ever made, which simulates any kind of automobile travelling on any surface. The second aspect of the prototype is that the players are involved in a community of users, so that by using message boards and chat rooms which we've provided, they're allowed to communicate over the web to collaborate on engineering and racing activities. Children work together as social networks, where we have some children working as experts and others as apprentices, as novices, learning from the others, gathering expertise and then using that to good practical advantage.
Well, we've had a huge amount of success with it. I mean, it's not to say that there are no problems, but the feedback from both children and teachers who've been involved, a lot of teachers have looked at it and said, please, we'd like this now, because it really does help us teach science and engineering. So it's gone very well, but it's at an early stage. We've made the first 3 levels, and what we're looking at now is what we'd have to do to take it right through to a fully fledged game.
The work being done at Future Lab is only part of the picture. Bristol was also the venue for CAL 2005, the Computer Assisted Learning Conference. A major sponsor was Microsoft, who flew in 2 highly influential American academics, both advocates of the educational value of gaming. Professor Jim Gee is author of a definitive book, What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. And Dr. Henry Jenkins from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, has also published widely on games and education. They challenge delegates to think again about what engages children.
So it's not about making schools fun. That's the wrong way. It's about making education engaging, which is what education should have been all along, but which games can be used effectively to get to.
The crucial is that we know, even from research in neuroscience, that engagement of that part of the brain that gives affect to things, that is, it says this matters, something's at stake here, pay attention, which is in part the amygdala, but not just the amygdala, means that human beings process information much more deeply than when you don't trigger that part of the brain. And one thing games are certainly very good at doing is triggering that part of the brain, and schools ought to be.
If you ask a kid what's the worst thing about a game, a bad game, they'll say it's too easy. And if you ask the kid what's the worst thing about a bad assignment, and they'll say it's too hard. That tells you the gap right there. That is, for whatever it is, the kids are willing to stay up all night to solve a level in a game and aren't willing to spend an extra 10 minutes to do their homework. Now that should tell you about some gap. Now, parents say, well, it's because it's pleasurable, or because it's fun, or because it's easy. But it's actually hard work to do these games well. Kids are willing to work hard to beat a game and are not willing to work hard to beat school. That's the fundamental dilemma, the paradox we have to look at and figure out why that is.
Professor Angela McFarlane is no stranger to the debate about computer-assisted learning in schools. A leading expert on the role of digital technologies in education, she sees the push for gaming technology being driven by the users themselves.
Too often in the traditional school curriculum, we give kids the nuts and bolts of the subject area rather than giving them opportunities to discover them for themselves. And that process of discovery is as important and probably more important than any of the content that you're learning along the way. Ultimately, the demand is coming from the kids. You know, children who are using computers at home for writing, for information seeking, for gaming, want to be able to use what they know are very effective tools to support them in their learning in the classroom.
Today, educational products which draw on mainstream game design are beginning to make an impact in the classroom. Parkside Community College in Cambridge is exploring software for use largely in media education.
Is it that one? Yeah. Get ready to switch.
Working within a 3D environment, children can script and animate a drama by devising scenes and character dialogue. This Year 7 class are creating scenes that examine the issue of bullying. Their teacher is James Durran.
Where is Neil? One of the things that we're interested in experimenting with the software is how
it can be used, yes, for teaching about media concepts, but at the same time be very valuable in a cross-curricular way for working in modern languages, in PSHE, a whole range of subjects, even with the software in its really quite early stages as it is at the moment, with very little content provided for different subjects.
This software package is one of a number of products that aim to put powerful and flexible tools for learning in the hands of children. They appear to be engaged and stimulated by the control they exert within its virtual world. On the way, it's hoped that they develop teamwork skills and expand their creative writing range as they produce their first screen drama. At Parkside College, they also plan to use it in Year 8 French and for the GCSE Media Unit. But the rise of video games as a leisure activity and now the entrance of game technology in the classroom is not universally welcomed. How are teachers supposed to keep abreast of the gaming world, let alone use the technology as a learning tool? Deeper fears are expressed around the potential addictive effects of gaming on children. To date, there's been little long-term research in this area. Games often challenge the player for many hours. It's this aspect of their appeal that worries parents most of all. Professor Mark Griffiths has established an international reputation in the area of gambling addictions. He's shown that 1 in 20 children claim they play for 30 hours a week.
There's very little good research that has focused totally on, if you like, true video game addicts. But certainly from the parents that ring me up and the few children I've seen over the last 15 years or so, what you tend to find is that we've got children who basically will not do anything else in their life except play video games. It's really hard to get them to eat, to get them to do any work. And they're dysfunctional children where video games totally take over their life. Now, for most parents out there watching this, they might say we've got children and they're worried and they think their children are playing excessively. But the good news is that excess doesn't always necessarily impact negatively on the children's life. Yes, the parent might want the child to be doing a bit more homework or to be reading a bit more, but the actual empirical evidence suggests that even excessive players, it doesn't seem to be the case that there is a necessarily negative impact on their life.
And there's this really hard bit where there's lots of green people and they're friendly. But as you go around, occasionally one or two of them keep turning into robots and shooting at you, and then you can't...
Even so, parents are still having to learn the often alien language of games and cope with children who take themselves off to play for hours at a time.
It has benefits in the educational side, but it can also change their behaviour and can be quite addictive. I can see why children would stay at these games for so long just to achieve the goals that have been set in the game. Interestingly, this year we gave Dory a game on Christmas Day, and I said to him afterwards, I don't think I'll ever do... Christmas Day should be a family thing, and he disappeared upstairs for the best part of about 3 or 4 hours, and I think next year if we do buy him a game, we wouldn't give it to him until Boxing Day or after.
And there's a further dilemma for parents. What's been observed in the classroom, that games engage and motivate children, may not receive such a warm response in the home.